The Birds Podcast, now live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds Podcast. It's brought to you today by my friends over at American Airlines. You know, I've been telling you for a while that American Airlines is now from Atlantic City International Airport. The airlines and the airport come together to become your gateway to the world. ACY is now your one-stop ticket to over 90 domestic and international destinations. You can get from, we were just talking, Rye, during the break, the Phillies, if they make the World Series against the Astros, they would play in Houston, and on Thursday night, the Eagles would be playing the Texans. You can go see a World Series game on Tuesday, Wednesday, I think, and then Thursday would be the Eagles and the Texans out there in Houston. You can get there with ACY, save time and money, avoid the fees and the hassles. You know what you do? You drive to the Atlantic City Airport, you check in there, you check your bags in there, and then they'll drive you in a luxury bus up to Philly. You go right through, you get on the plane, you fly to wherever you want to go. Then when you fly home, you get checked right back on the bus, and they drive you back to Atlantic City. It's pretty cool, convenient, and you can fly American Airlines from ACY. Book today at AA.com. Mike Ill, Ryan Rothstein's here. Of course, we're at Chickies and Pete's, and now it's Football at 4 with Andrew DiCecco from InsideTheBirds.com as he's here for a little look at the bye week Eagles. What's going on, Andrew?
Hey, Mike, doing well. How about yourself?
All is good, bud, and Eagles at the bye week. We saw them kind of, have that night with Dallas. Let's first get your you were there on Sunday night. What did you see in that matchup against Dallas, which was they got out to a 17-0 lead, and then the next thing you know, it's a close game all of a sudden.
Well, first of all, the crowd was electric, as you might expect, coming off that big Phillies win. And I really thought that really helped jumpstart the Eagles. They got off to a fast start. Obviously, that second series was a 7-minute, 36-second drive that really drained much of that first half. And, you really started to see that momentum carry them through, and you started to think this might be the game where they put a complete game together and put this team away once and for all. Now, that didn't necessarily play itself out. Obviously, the second half woes continue, which is a little bit concerning, and they almost fell asleep there a little bit, it felt like, in the third quarter, and gave Cooper Rush opportunities to make plays with his arm, and Zeke Elliott got going, of course. But then, the Eagles really were able to, that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson interception really turned the tides, I would say, and then Jalen Hurts threw an absolute heater to Devontae Smith to really regain control of that game. So, the good teams find ways to win, guys, as you know, and the Eagles have, but I think that they really need to take a step back, revert back to the drawing board throughout the bye week, and really figure out what's causing these second half woes, because they have yet to really put forth a complete game. So I guess if you're looking at it, and it's a little nitpicky, I admit, but, I guess that if you're looking at a team with a perfect record, that's the one thing that I would point to.
Yeah, and you look at this team 6-0, and I guess to ask you, a little nitpicky, but what is something that they need to work on as a team out of this bye week? Okay, we're 6-0, we're at the bye week, but look, last year, we're at Chickies and Pete's right now. The Cardinals are up on the TV screen. They play tonight. They were 8-0 last year. Pittsburgh was, 10-0 last year, and those teams fell apart. What does Philly need to do to make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, there's a couple of things, and I'm glad you brought that up, because when you look at the Eagles, if you really assess the roster and where they're having any breakdowns, I would say, obviously, we could all point to the second half woes, but I would also look at special teams. I really do think that if they don't address special teams in some capacity, be it the trade deadline or revamp their coverages or something to that effect, they're going to that will eventually cost them a game. I do think that. Look no further than that 63-yarder return by Kevon Turpin. That's just one of the many examples. The return game has been pretty underwhelming. I think Britton Covey has 3 muffs on the season. Eventually these things will come back to bite you. And then I look at the third down efficiency rate. I think that they're hovering right around the 42.5, 42.9, something like that %, which is not going to be good enough when you're facing better teams, or when you get into the colder months, when the margin for error becomes so small. You have to be able to find ways to convert on those money down. So I think that when you look at those three different things, guys, that's really what I'm pointing to as things you would like to see them clean up as we move forward.
Andrew, it's Ryan. Long time no talk, my friend. Hope all is well.
Yeah, man.
Let's look at this defense here for a second. And obviously, Howie Roseman addressed a ton of needs on the defensive side of the ball. So we can look at the talent as an obvious answer as to what has caused them to play so much better as a unit. But let's look at Jonathan Gannon, because he was on the hot seat for many, myself included. I was screaming and yelling about Gannon needs to prove himself this year, especially with the tools in his toolbox. Scheme-wise, what have you seen, Andrew, that Jonathan Gannon has really helped do to lead this unit to be so elite, really?
Yeah, Ryan. Well, I mean, there's a number of things that he's been doing. I mean, he still has that death by 1,000 cuts mentality where he would rather have the offense try to march down the field and give them opportunity to mess up, because you're not really going to be able to sustain, 15-play drive, whatever, 10 to 15-play drives on a regular basis. But I also think that he has been a little bit more timely with his pressures and blitzes and been a little bit more creative. Now, having a secondary that's arguably the best Eagles secondary I've seen, you can even compare it to the Troy Vincent, Bobby Taylor, Al Harris, Damon Moore, and Brian Dawkins secondary of the early Andy Reid years. I think this is the best that I've seen for the Eagles, and they're playing so cohesively right now, and they're so versatile, and they're getting after the football, which is allowing him a lot more flexibility in what he's able to do in terms of coverages and pressure packages, and also the linebackers, T.J. Edwards and Kaiser White. They really found a good pairing there. We wondered in the offseason and throughout training camp what that match would be as far as the two linebackers, and they've really found a good pairing there in those two. So I think what you're seeing is all three levels complementing each other well, and he doesn't have to go to these lengths to mask a deficiency of a Steve Nelson, who he had to do a lot of protecting last season, or the linebacking situation last year, which was really poor, and find ways to sort of cover that up. And now you're just seeing an efficient unit on all three levels. So I think you're seeing what he's able to do when he has the personnel that he needs to execute his scheme.
Since we're in the bye week for the Philadelphia Eagles, Andrew, I'll stick with the defense for a second. Why not? But only on the defensive side of the ball, who's been the MVP thus far? I think there could be a few obvious answers. Slay is probably the leader in that clubhouse if you want to throw in an honorable mention for biggest surprise. But one or two names that have really stood out to you.
Yeah, well, I'll give you three. I mean, but to answer your first question, I would say that Darius Slay would be my defensive MVP through 6 games. I think you could also make the argument that he's probably the best player on this team. Lane Johnson certainly warrants consideration as well. But James Bradbury is another player who's just been such a fantastic addition. Long, lengthy corner, physical, gets his hand on a lot of footballs. I think he's got 9 pass breakups, which leads the NFL. I don't know how Slay has said it multiple times after the game in the locker room. How did the Giants let this guy leave their building? It's a question that a lot of us are wondering, but he's going to cash in right now if he's able to continue at this pace. So, and I would also say either T.J. Edwards or Kaiser White. Those are both two guys that are up for contract extensions this year, and I think that they're both playing at such a high level, and you're seeing what the Eagles are able to do, what Jonathan Gannon's able to do, Ryan, when he has capable players at that position. So I would say Bradbury, Slay, and why don't we say Kaiser White?
Kaiser White's another interesting one because, you didn't bring him up. But Kaiser White and T.J. Edwards, I wanted to get your take on through 6 games, how they've changed the defense, how they've changed the way this defense can do things. Because how many times over the years, Andrew, have we talked, and we're talking about Singleton, Nate Geary, guys who just simply, we're when the other team put a game plan together, they'd say, where's 47? Where's 49? You can't do that anymore. How those two guys have really changed the way this defense can operate.
Well, they both complement each other so well because you have a physical downhill linebacker in T.J. Edwards, who, to his credit, you can't do much to improve your athleticism. That sort of is what it is. He's really improved in his range and his coverage acumen to make it so where he's not just the predominant early down linebacker. He's a three-down player now, But then you have Kaiser White, who's coming off a career season, and he's 26 years old, and he is the prototype for what the NFL is looking to do at that second level. He's a little bit undersized, but he's able to roam free sideline to sideline. He's a smart player. He flows to the football, very instinctual. So you have sort of the best of both worlds in someone in T.J. Edwards who can be that downhill enforcer, and then you have someone that's able to sort of chase and tackle, and he closes very quickly in Kaiser White. And you're able to, and obviously the defensive line's done a great job of keeping those two guys clean and able to clean up after the play, get after the running backs and pursue the quarterbacks as well.
Talking with Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, Eagles at the bye. Obviously, this is a team that I want to get your take on. Do they need to do anything at the trade deadlines in a couple of weeks? Does this team sit and evaluate itself and say, in 17 they went out and got a Jai. They made an addition. Does this team need to do that, or do you like the chemistry of this team right now? And are they deep enough that they don't have to go out and add someone?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned team chemistry, and I don't think that can be understated. Any move that's made, I think you have to make it in with the team chemistry in mind and knowing, because it's such a fragile dynamic, and the Eagles are really firing on all cylinders right now. That said, I think when you honestly take a step back and look at the roster, there is, to me, I would say backup safety is the most glaring need, and that became super evident when you see a guy like Kayvon Wallace have to step in, and there was a huge drop-off in play when C.J. Gardner-Johnson had to leave the game for a little while. And, he's not an ideal third safety. I mentioned this on your show before. I was surprised he made the roster. I thought Andre Sachare warranted a spot, but nevertheless, I look at a guy like maybe a Desmond King on the fourth, the AFC South Houston Texans, who are fourth in their division. And, he's a guy who was an all-pro punt returner in 2018. He can play safety. He can play nickel. I don't know if he's available, but, those are the type of players that they should look to add. You look at running back. If something happens to Miles Sanders, they're in big trouble. Looking at someone like a Boston Scott and Kenny Gainwell, they don't really move the needle, and they're kind of similar in their dimensions and what they're able to provide. I would look at someone who's in the last year of their contract, like a Jamal Williams, who is a fantastic pass blocker and would bring that downhill element that they so sorely need. I don't know that Trey Sermon's the guy, at least this year. I think he's still finding his way, and I don't know that they have a ton of confidence in him right now for him to turn him loose and have him be that guy. And then you look at someone like maybe a Robert Quinn on the Chicago Bears, because I really do think they need to bolster the pass rush, because you look at a guy like Teron Jackson, who wasn't even active this week, and they're already really light in that area. So I don't think that they can afford to go forward with just a small gamut of pass rushers at their disposal. So maybe even a Brian Burns if the Panthers are willing to part ways with them. A lot of this really is going to be determined by how they view Jalen Hurts. Do they view him as the quarterback of the future? Because if they do, they have a lot more wiggle room to work with those first-round picks.
Andrew, at the start of you've been following the team since the last couple of years, but obviously camp, and we went back to camp questions. Marcus Epps on the defense, I think that was a question. Is he your best safety? How has he answered that question that we had back in camp yet?
Yeah, I think he has, and I think he's had the more quiet of any of the starting secondary players this year. But he's very efficient and he's very smart and tough. I don't think that he's got enough credit in that area, but I think now he's starting to become a little bit more of a household name. And I think a lot of the fans and viewers that watch these games are starting to see what he's able to do. That pass breakup that he had to Peyton Hendershot in the second drive was just a testament to just his range and athleticism and the way that he sees things. He broke on that ball so quickly. And now you have someone in Marcus, and then you have him paired alongside someone like C.J. Gardner-Johnson, who just came away with 2 interceptions on Sunday night, and he's more of the playmaker and someone who's going to take away the football. I think Marcus is more of the physical player that you're going to see, and I think that he's seeing the game so well right now, and the game seems so slowed down for him. And then, I had a chance to talk to him after the game on Sunday, and he was just gushing about how just having 2 safeties that complement each other so well, and how they still have so much more room to grow and improve, which is really encouraging if you're an Eagles fan to hear that. yeah, I mean, I think Marcus Epps has really stepped up as a leader in that secondary, and I think he's also a prime candidate for a contract extension just based on the way that he's played.
The other question was on offense. It was Jalen Hurts, right? That was the biggest question at camp. This team looked pretty complete. Has he answered all the questions, or are there still some more that we need to see from the quarterback? Bye week, 6 weeks in, he's number 2, DraftKings MVP. Has he answered all the questions for you?
Most of my questions have been answered. I mean, I think that he's really taken a huge quantum leap forward in his progression as a quarterback in this league. And, you know, the one thing that I would like to see is just him put together a complete game. And there's a lot of factors that really that impact that. It's not just the quarterback, but I think that he's proven that when he needs to score points, he can. I think that his unshakable and unflappable demeanor has really resonated with this locker room, and I think that he has. I mean, the team goes as he goes, right? I mean, I think both him and Sirianni are just been pillars for this team right now, and I think that there's just something about Jalen that really resonates with this roster, and I've seen him grow as a passer and on his deep balls. And I've seen him really rise to the occasion it seems like every week everyone's like, yeah, but let's see if he can do this. Or let's see what he can do when he's in a hole. Or let's see what he can do when he needs to make a big play in the fourth quarter. He's done all those things. I would like to see him run a little less just to preserve his body, knowing how integral he is to the Eagles' success. But, I mean, to answer your question, yes, I have seen enough from Jalen. And I think that he's a player that's going to continue to improve. I think he's seen that. I think we've all seen that. And, knowing him and his mentality, just hearing him talk, you just know that he's going to do everything it takes to maximize his potential.
Andrew, I want to ask you about Miles Sanders because you look at what he's done. I think 537 yards from scrimmage. He's played well, all right? I can sum it up with that, and surprised me at least, but he's playing for a contract. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the year. There's a lot of rumors and talk right now about the trade deadline, what the Eagles should and shouldn't do. Has Miles Sanders' play and production potentially impacted what the Eagles front office will and will not do at the deadline, particularly at the running back position?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, one thing that I think we can all agree on and something that really stuck out to me when I watched Miles this year is just how decisive he is with his run, with his decision-making, and how he's just running forward with a full head of steam. He's just running more confident and with less indecision. And I think that you're seeing a lot more motivated Miles Sanders. Now, I don't know if it has anything to do with him being in a contract year and knowing what's on the other side, but I think the Eagles have leaned on him a little bit more than we've seen. I think he showed up this summer in a lot bigger physically and just a different mentality for Miles. Now, do I think that's going to impact what they do at the trade deadline? I still think, Ryan, that they need to add a bigger running back that's going to be a little bit more stable and solidify that pass blocking element, because I've seen Kenny Gainwell struggle in that aspect of his game. Boston Scott's not somebody that you want doing that on a regular basis. I really do think that they need, in the perfect world, a bigger running back who's good as a pass blocker, and that's why I mentioned Jamal Williams as someone. He's been one of the league's best for a few seasons now, and someone who's in the last year of his contract. So I really do think that in order to get the most out of Miles and to ensure that he doesn't wear down throughout the season, adding someone that can sort of shoulder the load, so to speak, would be the best practice right now, in my opinion.
Okay, Eagles at the bye, 6-0. They'll play Pittsburgh coming up. And, of course, you can hear that game next Sunday on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew DiCecco's over at InsideTheBirds.com. And don't forget the Inside the Birds podcast, the Inside the Birds pre- and post-game show, and, of course, right here on Football at 4. Andrew, appreciate it, bud.
Great talking to you guys. Take care.
As always, thanks, Andrew DiCecco on a Thursday gives us the Inside the Birds perspective on Football at 4.